Welcome to the podcast where we take a deep dive into the stories behind construction business leaders. We will share how they got started, how they found success, and the lessons learned along the way. I'm your host, Eric Fortenberry. Welcome to Builder Stories. Welcome back, everybody. Today, I am really excited. I have a very special guest for us. We have Brian Gottlieb. He is a prominent business leader, speaker, author, known for his expertise in building high-performance teams and fostering a strong workplace and great culture. I think it was in 2009, he founded a home improvement business, started with just $3,000 and apparently a plastic folding table. So I'll have to learn a little bit more about that here in a minute. But, over the next 12 years, he grew the company to over 1,000 employees, expanded across multiple states. A company is recognized by Inc. 5000 as one of the fastest growing companies in America. Brian's also the author of Beyond the Hammer, a fresh approach to leadership, culture, and building high performance teams. This book is awesome. It is really blends storytelling with actionable strategies, to help leaders cultivate and empower those cohesive teams. So, again, I'm really excited to have you on Builder Stories, Brian. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for that great intro. Yeah, the plastic folding table, it's legendary, right?
Yeah. So, why don't you give us the background? How'd you start that first business? How'd you get into construction? What led to that, and then beyond?
Yeah, well, look, I've been working with people at the kitchen table ever since I left high school. I went from high school into selling pots and pans at the kitchen table. But over time, I learned about home improvements and both doing the work, swinging the hammer, and also selling. I just love it. I love the interaction of people. I also loved, as a young kid, I loved the idea that I could go out, knock on somebody's door, and walk out with like a check in my hand and get paid that week. And it was pretty cool. So I got to take, I was able to control my own destiny. But in business, things take you down crazy directions. And I started a consulting business many, many, many years ago before my Tungeland business. And I was just so tired of being on the road. So I wanted to start my own company. And that's what I did. When it was in 2009 in Wisconsin, where there are more cows than people, I decided that's a great place for a home improvement company. So yeah, it was a plastic folding table with $3,000 in cash. And I'll tell you what, I stubbed my toe along the way a whole bunch of times, but also got really lucky. And yeah, we built into a monster business, and I sold everything a couple of years ago. So it's been a fun ride.
Dang, congrats. That's it's always awesome to know that there was a successful exit. You had a good transition personally for you, for the company and everything. So, what would you say though? What were some of the hardest things, when you first started off that you didn't realize were going to be those things that you might trip on?
Yeah. So in the early days, and I think anybody that has ever started a business, or if you own a business, you can relate to this, that, in the early days of having a business, it, the only rule of business is just to stay in business for another day, right? That's the only focus. How do we keep the doors open, right? You check your mailbox every 3 hours to see if a check came. But the other thing is that in the early days of a business, the success of the business really comes down to how well the founder or the entrepreneur can execute. How well they can work is what defines the success of the business. But in that space, really, the business owner just has a job. It's not really a business yet. To get to a business, you really have to start building teams. And as you start adding people to your teams, to your business, now all of a sudden, the business success is very much connected to how well your teams perform, and both in your presence and when you're not looking. So how well teams perform dictates the success. In fact, I'll share with you that I had an epiphany many, many years ago that the lid of the business was directly connected to the lid of the team. And if I wanted to grow a business, I had to first grow the people inside of it. And I think that's one of the key lessons of leadership is, how do we build people, right? How do we not become a victim of circumstance and we can't find good help out there? Or, there's been a labor shortage in this industry as long as I can remember. And guess what? There's going to be a labor shortage this year and next year too. But how do you not become a victim of circumstance? How do you become a builder of people? And, to me, that was an important lesson.
Yeah. How did, I see a lot of people struggle with knowing when to hire, and who to hire, and kind of, if you feel like you're, as entrepreneurs, right, we're putting on all the hats and we're just grinding it out and, really, burning ourselves, out at times. But how do you decide who and when you can make those moves?
Yeah, it's a great question. And And I think that there are two answers to this, right? The first answer is that I think you certainly have to hire to your weaknesses as soon as possible. Though they don't necessarily generate revenue, especially if you're like a sales and marketing kind of person. You need somebody in the office, and it's not a revenue generating position, but you still need it so you can do more of your sales and marketing. But then I think immediately you want to replicate your strengths as quickly as possible, because that's a position that you can onboard really fast. And if you can replicate your strengths, you can go even faster. It's much easier to onboard your strength. It's very difficult for me to, like, when I had to hire a CFO. I'm not a CFO, so training that person is very challenging, right? So I have to get a different level of expertise when I bring them in. But I think the other part of it is that it's about giving your weaknesses, when you hire to your weaknesses, giving them a loud voice in your business, and hearing them, because they're going to bring a very different perspective to the challenges that they might be seeing inside of the business, and we have to listen to that very closely.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. One of our philosophies here is may the best idea always win,
Yeah.
and I always want to encourage everybody, regardless, who you are, how long you've been here, what your role is, like, you want to foster that, environment where people feel comfortable speaking up and challenging the status quo. It's like, we brought you on because you're an expert in something, like we want you to come in and speak and share the, kind of share from your perspective. So I think that's great. How would you say you go about, though, creating that culture? Because when you do assemble high performing teams and those A+ players, like, you got to make
Yeah.
sure that you keep them. So what strategies did you all employ to do that?
Yeah, you certainly do. You have to, and you have to take some risk along the way as well, right? Because as you're building it, you have to take some risk. And I think one of the real decisions that a company has to make is, how do decisions get made inside of the business? Because decisions can create bottlenecks, and the owner can very easily become a bottleneck. I know for many years I was the bottleneck in the business, where I needed to be involved in absolutely everything. And it just wasn't sustainable. Once I got to one, two, 300 employees, it just wasn't sustainable. So then if we're going to have people make decisions in the business, are they going to make decisions around, based on policy, or based on empowerment? And it's two totally different approaches. And the challenge with policies is a very slow process in making decisions, and I don't think it's a great customer journey either. So if we're going to build a business where we're creating a high performing team, we want to certainly empower them. And part of empowerment is knowing that not every decision is going to be the right one that they make. And it's okay to be wrong. Just don't be wrong for long. And so we encourage, let's just go faster. Let's make decisions. And you know what? If we miss a couple, we make a couple wrong ones, don't worry about it. We'll correct ourselves, but we're still going to go faster than our competition so we can really scale. And I think that's giving people permission, real permission to in a policy driven business, you punish mistakes. In an empowered business, you frown upon indecision, right? Inaction and indecision just isn't acceptable. So you have to keep the ball moving forward.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. We also subscribe to the, let's move fast, break things, and clean up after ourselves.
That's
As
right.
long as you learn from your mistakes and you don't keep making the
Yeah.
same mistake over and over. I mean, I think that's how you push, the bounds, and how you continue to innovate. So I couldn't agree more. I'm curious. So how do you decide when to, because when you recruit this, these really talented people, you don't always need, or at least at our company at Jupiter, like, we don't have this, like, kind of middle management layer. At what point did you have to start kind of hiring people to manage versus be individual contributors? Because, I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of times that, you take that individual contributor out of that role, put them into a manager role, and, like, that's just not their jam. They're not a good fit. And they're just like, I want to get back to individual contributing as fast as possible. Like, how do you kind of,
Yeah.
navigate that? Because I find the more hierarchy you bring into place, sometimes it kind of, slows things down, if you will.
It certainly does. And the other risk to a thick org chart with a lot of layers in it, the CEO, the owner of the business, gets further and further and further away from the customer. And that can be a problem, right? We have to really stay close to the customer, or we can be disrupted very easily. We have to always know, how is that customer journey doing? But also, it's not realistic to have 50 people report to be my direct reports. I wouldn't properly serve any of them.
Yeah.
It is important to hire managers for the right reasons, right? and I've made the mistake of, and I think many companies have, I'm not alone in it, putting somebody in a management role simply because they have the most experience. And typically a manager is hired out of necessity. We might hire salespeople, we might hire marketers and installers and teach them like crazy on how to be successful before they're allowed to talk to a customer, right? But we put managers in a role without any formal training whatsoever. And so we tend to yield on the side of the most experience. And to me, what's most important, like an umbrella, and I've had to learn it the hard way because I've put managers in roles that weren't really good at talking to people, and that's probably not the right decision. So, first and foremost is they have to be passionate about coaching and mentoring others. That's like an umbrella. And in my book, in Beyond the Hammer, I write about the 10 practices to top performing managers for that reason, because we had to learn a playbook. We had to be as good at teaching salespeople how to sell as we were teaching managers how to lead a team, and understanding that it's not the idea that, well, there's the difference between leadership and management. It's not two different people. It's often the same person doing two different things. Sometimes you have to put your management hat on where you're focusing on the daily KPIs and the weeds of the business. And other times you have to put your leadership hat on where you're driving change in human behavior, change in direction, change in belief, and all those sort of things. Those are leadership principles. So to become a great manager, a manager needs to learn both, and that's what makes them successful.
Yeah, absolutely. We call those people the unicorns, right? They got multiple skill sets and are able to,
That's right.
to do both sides of it. It's so interesting though that you kind of brought up the notion of like the larger an organization grows, the farther or more disconnected from, the customer, the CEO or the owner, kind of those key lead people become. And that thought really resonates with me because I get asked all the time, like how do I stay so involved with the customers? And I have chats and text and calls and very involved in our Facebook group. And I think like those those interactions I find to be just so valuable, that I don't want to let go of that. I'm curious when you've, coached other, businesses and especially those ones that are kind of the smaller business, the owner operator growing into building out a team and really starting to hit scale, getting into the millions and millions of sales. Like, what do you say? And when do you think is the right time? And how do they kind of navigate that? Because a lot of times it is the owner's involvement that is that extra touch. It's that secret, sauce that they bring to the table where the customer knows, that at the end of the day, you got the person who cares more than anybody else there to make sure that they're taken care of. So how do you navigate that growing challenge?
Yeah, because it's not a scalable model if the business, like we were talking about, if the business owner is involved in everything. Well, the first thing is, again, what is the culture of the organization? Does the business have a strong purpose? Do they have a good mission statement and a vision statement that's woven deep into the fabric of the business? Do the people have purpose and direction? And they know what their part is in the bigger mission of the business and where it's going. And then recognizing that the managers are really the custodians of the company's culture. That's what they are. They do the hiring, they do the firing, they do the promoting, they do the compensating, they do the training. And how well they do those things or how they approach those things really affects how people inside of the business think about being on that team or think about the organization in general. And how people think and feel about the business affects whether they show up on time, how hard they work, all those things that dictate whether or not the organization performs. So I think there are a couple of things that we want to think about if you're growing a business and how do you stay close to the customer. I think one of the big risks that happens in many, many organizations is that if you peek behind the curtain of a meeting, whether it's a marketing meeting or a sales meeting, it's very much a transactional conversation. It's what's our marketing costs running at? What was our closing average? What's our average order value? It's or they're talking about the upset customer, right? The problematic customer and trying to solve that. But rarely, what often gets missed is what about our happy customers? How do we always talk about our customer in every single meeting? I read a book and I pulled it and implemented it in my business. It was the concept of that in every meeting, you keep an empty chair. And on that empty chair, you have a sign that says the customer. So we always want to make sure that in all of our meetings, we're talking about our customer because otherwise you can can create a very transactional type of business. And I think we all know that relationships matter. Relationships really matter when it comes to business. So how do you just keep that front and center all the time? And I think the last thing I'll leave you on that subject is that the moment I'm too busy to talk to my customers, I better re-examine my role. How about that? If I really run a business.
Yeah, no, that's really great feedback. I love that idea, the empty chair. It's so important that and I think a lot of organizations do tend to, forget the customer, and that's why you're here in the first place. And so making sure that their opinions and their frustrations, their challenges, the things that are working and aren't working, like all of that should be taken into consideration when you're making every decision. So I really love that. And you talk too about, the importance of making sure that your team is fully bought in to your mission, vision, core values. Like I couldn't agree more. Like I preach that as well. It's the very first thing in our business playbook that we share with our customers. Like, it's so important, and I think beyond that, like what you see is like what you said, like, when your team is fully bought in and they can, really live out, what you would be doing as well and how you would treat the customers. Like that is truly how you know that you've built a great team, a team that you can trust to handle the tough situations, handle, whatever comes their way. And like that's how you know you've built a great team.
That's right.
So I think it's so true.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that when you have a meaningful mission, all right? When you have a meaningful mission that activates people and a meaningful vision that people understand, this is what we aspire to become, this is how we win, this is my role in getting there, these are our core values, all of those sorts of things. Then you can start taking the KPIs of a business, the key performance indicators that matter, and connecting them back to something in your mission. As an example, one of the things we did is we created a program called Baths for the Brave, where in the shower we were doing 500 bath remodeling projects a month. It was a big business, right? And when you in the bath business, you go in a lot of homes and you see there's some sadness to it because we've run across so many veterans in Wisconsin and in Arizona where people that have served our country proudly, but now they have a bathtub that is really dangerous to step over, and they're simply afraid to take a shower safely in their own home. So we thought that was a shame, and they didn't have the money to do anything about it. So we started surprising veterans with free, safe shower systems, and it grew into this really big program that now happens in about 30 states every year around Veterans Day. But what we were able to do is now then start connecting our KPIs to that mission. So it's not a matter of yes, the lead is sacred, but beyond that, every lead that gets left behind is a potential veteran that we're not able to serve. So it actually brings your KPIs to a higher calling as well. And I think that's the real advantage to having a true mission and vision. It's not like it's not on an island by itself. It's truly woven into the business and everything that we do.
Yeah, I love that. Can you talk a little bit more about, so if you're a younger business and you haven't yet identified your KPIs, like, I see people struggle to know, like, well,
Sure.
what are the key,
Yeah.
the key metrics and the key
Right.
things that are making the biggest impact? How do people go, figure that out?
Yeah, and I'll share them with you right now. And going back to one of the first questions you asked me about when you start hiring people, I bet I bet 80% of companies out there, there's some role that they need to hire for. There's some role that they need to hire for, but they're afraid to hire for that role because they don't want to take on the overhead. Now, that is a symptom of a much bigger problem because if we say, what is the root cause of that problem? The truth is they're not confident they can hit their forecasted targets. So so if they don't know that they're going to do whatever revenue target or profitability target, then they're afraid to make hiring decisions. And that's when a business gets stuck. So you have to become great at hitting targets. What targets? Well, the KPIs. Now, I believe the most important KPIs, first of all, from a marketing standpoint, is what are the number of net issued appointments we have to issue every single month to our sales team? Okay. Also, at what cost? What is that cost per net issued appointment? What does it cost me to get a sales rep to sit at a kitchen table and tell their story? How much does it cost each time I do that? And then also, what is my fully loaded marketing cost as it relates to installation volume and sales volume? So those are the marketing KPIs. And when you get great at forecasting that and hitting those targets, well, now you can start spending more money confidently because you know that that you're getting results. On the sales KPIs, look, I think it's really important just to name a few is obviously closing average, net to net closing average. Every time I net issue an appointment, I come out with this much of a net sale, this many net sales. So being able to forecast that, forecasting what I call an NSLI, which stands for net sale per lead issued. So what is it? What is my return on investment from a marketing spend? And of course, sales volume is another number from a sales standpoint. Production, I think you have to be great at forecasting what's my material cost and what's my labor cost. And from a financing standpoint, what is it? And by the way, also lead time. If I sell it today, what is my cycle time to complete it? And I think in the financing KPIs are, I hope customers are using financing as a tool for selling at the kitchen table, but there's a cost to that. And, and is that cost all over the place? Or are you able to, we always planned on 4% of revenue went towards financing. And so we could offer it to everybody. But when a company gets really good and Eric, here's the thing. It is ugly. It is sloppy. It is messy when you start doing it. It is a mess. It was a mess for me. It's a mess for everybody. I hit my sales numbers. I missed my marketing numbers. I killed it on my production, but now I have no leads, not enough salespeople. It's a sloppy process, but it can't live with just the owners. We have to get the team to help with forecasting, and we have to teach the team how to hit forecasted targets with a high level of certainty. That's the essence of empowerment. It's giving them the ability. The sales manager, he's in the business of selling. That's his little business inside of the business. The marketing department they're in the business of generating leads. That's their business within a business. We as leaders have to teach them how to build a better business by hitting their own forecasted targets. It doesn't happen in a silo. It happens with a team.
No, no, I couldn't agree more. If you ever come down to our office in Dallas, I mean, we got dashboards and all of our metrics and KPIs. They're all over the walls everywhere for every team. It's so important. And just like you said, like you got to define them, and then you got to track them, and you got to obsess over them. Like, I tell people too, like your first time, building out your annual budget and creating a model, you're going to make a whole lot of assumptions and they're all going to be wrong, but that's okay, because now once you gather data and as you start hitting, your numbers, you can start looking back and say, oh, well, we missed this one is because of this assumption. Well, why did we get that wrong? What was our underlying, fallacy there, and how do we improve? And it just helps you keep growing and improving. So, totally with you. I mean, and I love the transparency, right? Like you got to have your team bought into this, and that's how you're going to move and grow the fastest you possibly can. Like I see so many owners, they just, they don't want to share, what's our profit margin, or how are we pricing, or what are our sales? And it's like, man, like you're only hurting yourself. If
Yeah.
only you knew.
Yeah, look, and they use the P&L to see how the business did. A P&L is an autopsy, okay? That was last month. That was like, that was like a lifetime ago in home improvements. Last month was a long time ago. And the P&L should really only confirm what you already know to be true. It really just is a confirmation document, and it shouldn't be the thing that told you how you really did. Your KPIs will tell you how you're doing. And the nice thing about home improvements and home services is you can take most targets and you can boil them down to a daily target. How many net issued appointments do I need today? How many sales do I need today? What sort of installation revenue do I need today? And by getting your managers to report on two numbers every day, this was my target, this was my actual, this was my target, this was my actual. The closer you can put those numbers next to each other, the better they're going to get at hitting targets. And over time, once they become really good at hitting targets, it's not like they're always going to hit targets. Guess what? They're still going to miss targets because that's how business is. It's imperfect. But then you as a leader get to ask them a few questions. To me, the three most important questions are, what are the reasons we miss target? What are we doing about it? And by what date will we be back on target? The reason we want to ask that is because we empower the managers to formulate a plan, a strategy, and a timeline in turning their department around to get back on target. It's all about developing people and all about helping them be better business leaders inside of your business.
What are your thoughts on tying their compensation, some sort of an incentive based, bonus based,
Yeah.
commission based to those targets?
Yeah, it's extremely important, because that's the other thing about this industry. You have so many opportunities to create variable compensation structures, and it should be certainly tied to their metrics. People should not have to wonder how their performance is being measured, or how their performance affects their compensation, right? So when you can tie all these things together, it's very, very effective. Now you have to be careful not to have what's called role conflict inside of a business. Like, as an example, I don't like bonusing. I don't like paying sales managers based on revenue on a month, because the truth is they can't control revenue on the month because they don't control marketing and they don't control the lead flow. They can control conversions. They can control what the conversions are. So I want to compensate them on conversions, so I don't create role conflict and have the sales manager mad at the marketing manager because they didn't get enough appointments. You control conversions, that's what you get compensated on. Marketing controls, how many leads they can issue, and the conversions in the marketing world. So tying compensation to that is it's like throwing jet fuel on your business when you do it right. And to
Yeah.
your point, being transparent with your financials, I think, is a game changer, because it takes a team to build a profitable business. So it's all good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I'm curious, what are your thoughts, so aside from compensation, on how do you, like what else can you do to motivate and
Yeah.
inspire people to want to show up every single day?
Yeah. Well, we have to say to ourselves, if look, one of the pillars of my book is the idea that leaders model their business as a training organization, right? And I think people want more than just a paycheck. They want to feel valued, they want to feel appreciated, and I think they want a chance to grow within the organization. And when you model your business as a training organization and you give people a chance to move up inside of your business and create upward mobility, it becomes a game changer for people. Positive work culture with opportunities to grow. And a lot of it comes down to even org chart design. The classic org chart in home improvements is you have like one sales manager and then 50 salespeople, and it's just not as sustainable. Or maybe you add a couple more assistant sales managers. We ran our business through squads. So we split our business up into groups of four. And in each pod of four, there was a squad leader and three salespeople or three marketers. The squad leaders were co-producers, so they were still doing the work, running appointments or setting appointments or installations, but they were doing it because it was the next step up for an exposure to leadership. So they got to learn about, maybe they'll do a book study, maybe they'll do Beyond the Hammer or whatever book that is, or they'll coach their team or do little morning phone call huddles with their team to motivate them. But as you start to build bench strength inside of your business, then when you want to take on a new product or open up another location or anything like that, you have a whole team of people that are hungry and eager to learn. And I think that goes a long way for retention as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, our customer success team has been one of the fastest growing teams that we've had. And it's like, how do you, right now they all kind of report up to Travis, who our vice president of customer successes, and it doesn't, that's not scaling. And so we're looking at creating kind of those teams within, and then having, the veterans, the people who've been around the longest, who have the best performance, like letting them start to lead a team where they can do that same thing that you're talking about. They're still doing their day to day, but they also have that opportunity to get some leadership experience, coaching others, onboarding them, bringing them up to speed, stepping in when they may need help. So I totally agree. It's a great,
And you
great
can make
thing.
it a lot of fun. So we had so many squads. Each squad leader would get compensated based on how well their team performed. It was no longer about individual performance. It was now a compensation structure around their team performance. So obviously they want to help their team win, right? But then each squad had its own name and its own logo. So I let them name their own squads, come up their own logos for them, and the squads would compete with each other on a monthly basis. So we'd have the crazy, silly prizes. We had this one thing, it was a steak. It was a T-bone steak on a trophy. And it said, steak is for closers. And it was bragging rights as a revolving trophy that the winning team got the trophy on their desk for the month. Anyway, but I think you can have fun competition that's very healthy inside of the business too, when you do it
Yeah.
right.
No, we that's exactly what we do. We got leaderboards for every team. We even like got some little emojis that pop
Love
up when
that.
they hitting certain goals and thresholds and things. But
It's
yeah, it's
fantastic.
a very motivating thing. We actually have a hammer that we had engraved. It's got each team's name on it. And so every month, at the beginning of the next month, we basically, the point leader, gets the hammer, gets the bragging rights, and they get to have it. But I love the notion of maybe even shifting it more to the team. Because as we're growing larger and larger, well, you only have one individual who can be kind of that individual leader. But if we looked at it as a team based, that could be really interesting.
Yeah, no, we did on the installation side, we did something really fun. Are you a college football fan? Do you watch college football at all?
A little bit.
I mean, me too. I'm not a big college football fan, but you notice their helmets are covered with stickers, right?
Yep.
And so we started adopting that concept with our installers, where we would give out little red stars that they could put on their driver's door of their vehicles. And it was for quality, it was for safety, it was for productivity, it was for doing something good for a customer, it was for a positive review. So these installers would have their doors covered in stars. So like when the team is scheduling an install, they would, oh, you've got Corey coming out. He's a 21 star installer. You're gonna love him. And then they actually compete for stars on their doors. They'd get a star and a bag of beef jerky. And it was just another really fun way of kind of like gamifying it. But
Yeah.
then the installer is the amount of pride they have pulling up to somebody's home with their door covered in stars. If they ever want to leave, they're not just going to another job for $1 an hour more. They're walking away from, their identity, which is connected to their vehicle and as it should be. So it's all very, very positive.
Yeah. No, I love that idea. I'm curious though, like, I mean, obviously there's not everything is going to be, positive, happy go lucky, right? Like, how do you coach people in regards to managing, the grapevine and when, the unhealthy conflict comes
Yeah.
about, like, how do you kind of deal
Yeah.
with those situations?
Yeah. Well, the first thing we have to understand is that what we tolerate, we actually attract more of. If we tolerate a certain behavior inside of our business, we're now saying that behavior is okay. It could be as simple as if you have Zoom meetings and you some of the people have their cameras off. Well, if some of the people have their cameras off, next thing you know, more people are going to have their cameras off because I guess that's okay to have your camera off. Or if certain people are selling a job below a certain margin and the job doesn't get bounced, well, I guess we can sell more jobs below that margin. And ultimately your culture is shaped by your lowest level of acceptable behavior. So what we tolerate, we attract more of. And as a leader, we just really, if your culture means something, okay, if it's truly your point of differentiation, and I think it's the most important point of differentiation. In fact, if you want to copy our performance, you first have to copy our culture and what goes on inside of our people's heads. That's where it lives. So you have to protect that, and you have to have tough conversations along the way. Just to add to that, one of the other pillars in the book is the idea that it's the idea that leaders have to be aware of the echo of their voice. Okay, and what that means is that often the team is going to determine what type of day they're going to have based on the type of day that the leader is having. If the leader is coming across stressed out or angry, the team is going to be very, very worried and nervous and keeping their head below the desk. And we as leaders have to set the stage on how the team behaves. We have to be very conscious of our echo. And it's not even a matter of just being stressed out or angry. It's even the echo of staying present with people. Like, I mean, we're on this podcast right now, but imagine if so hold on a minute. Yeah, Eric, I got a telephone call. I got to take this really quick. Hold on a minute. You'd be like, Brian, we're on a podcast. What are we doing? Taking a telephone call right now. So there are certain areas where you'd never pick up your phone and interrupt a meeting. Yet we do it all the time when we're having a one-on-one with people or we're sitting and having dinner with our wife and staying present. When I'm with Eric, I'm all in with Eric. When I'm with George, I'm all in with George because that also sends a very, very different echo than the echo of distraction. So those are all ways I think that we deal with challenges when they come up.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I've certainly I will admit that I'm one that needs to work on that. My wife reminds me all the time, so definitely need to take that home to the bank
Y
there and
Yeah, you and
focus.
me both. It's progress, not perfection, my friend.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how do you make the tough call, the decision when you need to remove someone from your organization? Because I see time and time again, and look, I think it's one of the hardest things that a business leader has to do is to let somebody go because that is going to make their life even harder. It's going to affect their family, their well-being.
Yeah.
But like I see so many people, they just keep they know it in their gut, but they keep kicking the can down the road and they're not making that hard call. So how do you decide that? How would you
Yeah.
recommend people do that?
Yeah. Well, I'm a big, big believer in performance reviews for the team on a regular basis because I have to know that people, first of all, understand how their performance is being measured and they understand that that performance affects their compensation. So that's like we talked about a little bit ago. it's important that I have performance reviews with my people so nobody's ever surprised if they are going to be let go because w- people now I do believe that you get a fork in the road where it's either coach or let go. And I always try to coach first. But if somebody is not hitting target, whether it's an installation target or a marketing target or a sales target, I think it's important to put somebody on an improvement plan, and it should be short, measurable, and actionable. Like, okay, I'm going to give you 10 more appointments, and over these next 10 appointments, I need you to do A, B, and C, and call me after each appointment, and we're going to see where you're at. And then if either they're going to do it or they're not going to do it, and if they don't do it, then you have a decision to make. You put them on another shorter term performance improvement plan, or is it just time to give them an opportunity to be successful somewhere else?
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes down to, what how well do they align to the culture of your business, right? Because you can have a high performer that's a low culture fit. And that's not good either. We might want to think we need to isolate them. We're the top performers, but how do you build an aligned team when some of your team is isolated, right? Or you have the high culture fit low performer. This is the sales rep that everybody loves, but they can't even close a car door, less a home improvement project. Or but I think the bigger challenge is on the other. So typically high culture fit, low performers will follow performance improvement plans very well. With high performers, low culture fits, the installer that does great work, but my gosh, please stop talking to our customer. Just please stop talking to our customer. Those people you have to coach by how well they align their behaviors to the mission, vision, and core values of the business. Hey, you're hitting your KPIs, but these are some things you need to work on. If in either of those cases they're not willing to take the action, then you're hurting your own culture by keeping them. So it's not a personal decision. It's ultimately their decision whether it works or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, what about, again, there's the situation where, let's say, things are going great, we hired a team, maybe we overhired, now we've got some sort of, economic downturn, we got some sort of, factor outside of your own control,
Yeah.
outside of your team's control.
Yeah.
How do you go about managing that
Yeah.
downside risk and when you may need to downsize?
Yeah, well, like even like COVID as an example in the early days, like the first thing is, I think it's important that the reason you need to know your numbers in the business is because you should always be stress testing your P&L, right? What is your break even if you need to get there, right? Where do you start losing money as an organization? So how do you stress test the P&L? But I also think, how do you also reassign people? But sometimes you have to make very, very, very difficult decisions. And sometimes you have to, as difficult as it was, we had to go through and actually grade and rank our team because we knew we had to reduce our force. And how do you do that? Well, it's kind of this like a forced ranking. I'll also share with you that sometimes the answer isn't necessarily removing people from the business. There's some value to, in my opinion, you always want like more salespeople than you have appointments. And I'm going to say that again. You want more salespeople than you have appointments to run. And the reason is because, Eric, you and I can go on a road trip and we can travel the country next week and we can go visit home improvement companies across the country and we can look at any monthly sales report as it is today. And then we can remove the bottom 30% of performers from that sales report. And their month will look totally different. It'll look a whole lot better when you remove the bottom 30%. This is the concept of what I call working a batting order. So what you want to do is intentionally have more sales reps than appointments, so you can always take out your bottom performers and bring them back in-house for training. So if you should always be training your bottom performers, but not having them be trained at the kitchen table. You want to train them in-house. And I think the other piece of it is that I think, how do you insulate yourself from a downturn, right? That's, I think, another important question. And to me, it all comes down to your marketing mix. And if you're relying on like one marketing source or two marketing sources or referrals as your number one lead source, it's not really a scalable model. I believe that you should think of your marketing mixed in two buckets. You have your take it marketing, which is you do a TV ad, you do a Facebook ad, you do a Google ad, and whatever lead comes to you, you take and you hope to get an appointment out of it. But then there's also make it leads, right? Where you go out and you make a lead every single day. You have a canvassing team, you have shows, fairs, festivals. Every day you have somebody on your team that's going out and making leads. And the more you can make leads, the more impervious your business becomes to an economic downturn because you're able to make leads every single day. And I think this is an important discipline in a business.
Yeah, that is such great advice right there. I see so many people that, they like to kind of just sit back and say, the ads aren't working, the leads are drying up, they're not coming in, they're not coming in. It's like, well, what are you doing to be proactive
Right.
to go out there and find them?
Yeah.
Bring them to the table, make them as you described. I mean, that's so important that people like don't just sit back and
Yeah.
whoa me, blame everything around them. Like, no, you got to take action and go find it and make it happen.
I sit on the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University. I go to these meetings twice a year, and they put out something called the LIRA report, which is the leading indicator of remodeling activity. You should Google it. It's a great report. Comes out every quarter, and it essentially shows that 2025 is flat. Okay, essentially flat, plus or minus a 0.5% one way or the other. And the truth of that is that there are going to be companies that are going to be up 30%, and there are going to be other companies that are going to be down 30%. Spending might be flat, but there are still going to be companies that know how to generate leads and know how to close and know how to scale that are going to do very, very well. And there are other companies that are going to struggle. And I think if you when we look at our business, we have to say, are we, a fundamental to this to the industry is the ability to make leads. And the more you can make and the better you can treat them and the better technology you have like JobTread to to make a better customer experience, the better a business you're going to have as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. How would you advise people? So when, oftentimes people struggle to know how much should I invest in marketing? Do we hire a bunch of marketing people? Do we hire a marketing agency? Like, how do you,
Yeah.
how do you sort of, recommend from a financial investment
Yeah.
budgeting standpoint,
Yeah.
what should they be doing?
Yeah, well, I like the fact that you use the word investment and not expense because marketing is an investment, right? When I first started my business, and I should say, prior to me starting my business, one of the things I got a chance to do is visit companies across the country as a consultant, and I kept a journal. And on one side of the journal was, if I ever open up a business, I'm never doing this. And the other was, if I ever open up a business, I'm definitely doing this. So I had this nice little list going. But I saw a lot of companies get in a bad way in 2008 because they got over their skis on marketing or they didn't have money to market with. And so like the leads dried up and they ended up, not having a great outcome from it. When I started my business, I set up a separate checking account and I took 7% of every single check that I collected from every customer for any reason and stuck it in that separate account. And that was my marketing money. This way I always had money to spend on marketing. Now, at the time, 7% was a lot, right? As the business grew, what happens is, I think and you just have to get used to this if you're growing a business, that in the beginning, you can generate a small amount of leads at a super low cost as a percentage of revenue. The the more you have to try to generate more leads, you're digging deeper into the lead well, and that cost starts to pick up a little bit, right? If you're trying to generate enough leads to keep 100 sales reps busy, you're probably not going to do it at 2 or 3%. It's probably going to be closer to like a 15% marketing cost, which is kind of what we always planned for. So I think the important thing is to plan for it, but then also, Eric, you and I can sit down and we can model out a business that's profitable with a 5% marketing cost or a 25% marketing cost if we do it right. What kills a business is when you think it's going to be 5% and it turns into 25%. So that's where, knowing your numbers, managing your numbers, making marketing decisions, taking some risk, knowing it's okay to be wrong, but you're not going to be wrong for long. So, getting off of a bad marketing source quickly, but just managing the data. But I think it is an important. It's very difficult to grow a business without a marketing budget.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think, we've talked a little bit about marketing, talked some about sales. We'll make the assumption that, you priced the job right, you sold it right. When you look at the operations and the actual delivery, what are the key, the key factors that you're looking at to know, did we hit our goals there? Were we
Yeah.
successful?
Yeah.
Where did we struggle? How do you, kind of monitor and manage all of that?
Yeah. So, look, have been very successful scaling my business with simplicity in mind. How do you constantly remove complexity from the organization? Because the more complicated the projects are that we sell, the more chances for mistakes that can happen. The longer we're in somebody's home, the more chances for mistakes to happen. So I like a much simpler business when it comes to like a one-day bath business or a one-day window business. But look, I also had a sunroom division, which is a little more complexity to it. So then how do you ensure, first of all, customer delight matters. And it's not about exceeding customer expectations because you really can't measure that. It's about how do we meet expectations with consistency, right? How do we deliver with consistency to our customer? And look, I think a lot of it comes down to how well we're training people and what our training model looks like and how do we inspect that process. I can share with you when we were scaling our business, one of the complaints we would get from our customers is that we were bad communicators. They're terrible communicators. And I would put people at it, I'd put scripts at it, I'd put call cadences at it, and we still kept getting that complaint that we weren't good communicators. And we started looking at it, we're like, well, it's because we have so many new customers every single day. Everybody's got a different idea of what good communication looks like. So creating a cadence might be good for us, but it might not be good for them. And we realized that what they really wanted was they wanted their installation date. When is the project getting installed? So we said, okay, how do we the best way to improve communication is not having to talk to our customers as much, scheduling the job, giving them an exact installation date at point of sale. Because if we can do that, we really solve a lot of other things. And that's what we built the business model around, that every customer, when we're sitting at the kitchen table and they buy, they get their exact installation date. And that's what really, really helped. And then, of course, measuring the fact that you can deliver to that too. And what are the KPIs? What are you measuring, right? Are you measuring reviews? Are you measuring labor cost and material cost? And what are you doing when it's out of whack about it too?
Yeah, I love that. It's one of my favorite features of JobTread is the ability to see all of your jobs on one view, kind of when are they projected to start to finish, and that helps you to better kind of estimate when you'll be able to start that customer's job. But then once you tell them and tell people you got to go set that baseline, and then anytime something diverges and you got to shift things out, like you can see exactly where you got off track, so that hopefully you can take that into account and quit. If you need more lead time, if you need take other factors into account, it helps you to get better and better at giving those dates and then holding yourself to it. So totally agree though.
Yeah, and as you grow a business, right? Then what is the role of the leader in all this? A leader deals with the oddities of business, right? The managers run the day to day, and they drive the results. The leaders deal with the oddities, and it's important because if we want to be great at hitting forecasted targets and hitting installation windows and dates and all those sort of things, you really have to say, okay, if I thought it was going to be 5 days to do this job and it didn't take 5 days, why? Let's really look at it. Let's not accept that it took six. Let's say, what did we learn from this? What could we have done differently? And this is very, very important. It's about separating people from process. Because if I say to the production manager, how come this job took 6 days and not five? He's likely to say, well, it was George's fault and George didn't show up and blah, 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 it's somebody's fault. And they point the fingers at others where, in fact, if you want to get to the truth, you have to remove people from process. And the conversation should be, look, we know we have the right people. Where is our process broken inside of the organization or not adhered to in the business? Where is our system broken down where this job took 6 days instead of five? Where did we break in the model?
Yeah.
And it's an important process to go through.
That's awesome. How often would you recommend, people do, job performance reviews? Like, are you sitting down at the end of every job? Are you doing it weekly, monthly? I mean, obviously
Yeah.
it probably varies based on business and the type of work, but, just a little bit of the importance of that.
Yeah, I think a sales rep needs a performance review much more often, every 90 days, but they need a coaching session almost daily. So so I think, sales is a different thing, or they certainly need a lot of one-on-one time. I think production people, I think every 6 months is a good idea, but I also like to alternate a performance review where and it's not like a bad thing, it's a positive thing. It's trying to understand where they want to go in the business and how are they performing against the KPIs and how are they aligning to the mission and vision. And but then you alternate every 6 months with performance review and what's called a stay survey. Instead of just waiting for an exit survey when somebody quits and goes on their way, a stay survey asking your team a few questions once a year. Number one, what is it that makes you want to come to work every day? Number two, what would one day make you want to leave? Number three is, what is one thing the company is doing wrong today that we should fix? And number four is, what is something you're not getting from your manager that you really need? So I think that we might think we have a certain type of culture in our business, but we don't know until we inspect our culture, and we inspect it through a stay survey. So I think that also helps. So I think performance reviews and stay surveys are good tools to keep so that everybody's on the same page. You
Yeah.
know,
No, I love that. That's I'd never actually heard of that, and sounds like a great great idea.
and if I can add one more piece to this, and I know that you're a big believer in documented processes and systems, right?
Yep.
And this is important side of a business. And if you think, where do they come from? If you lay out the entire journey of your customer, from this is when we generate a lead to this is where the job is done and paid, and you think about all the different interactions that happen between either somebody on your team and the customer, or somebody on your team and another department in your team, anytime there's an interaction between human beings, there's an opportunity for friction, right? There's an opportunity for friction. And that's where you start with your documentation. What do you want that interaction to be like? Because it reduces friction points. If you're thinking about you need to do a better job documenting processes and you don't know where to start at your friction points, and you'll be better off because of it.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. I'm curious, and I'd be remiss not to ask, just with the success that you've had. I mean, I see a lot of times people feel like they're dominating their own local market. They've had a lot of success there, and then they're trying to make the decision: do I expand into a new market? I mean, you went into multiple new states. Like, how did you kind of
Yeah,
weigh that decision when you first decided to
yeah,
enter multiple markets, and what
yeah.
did that look like?
Yeah, we would all be surprised on how little of a market share we have, even when we have a big business, by the way. But I like to look at other markets through a few different lenses. Number one, is my lead cost getting so high in my existing market that I've maxed out on all my marketing sources and it's time to do something else? Do I have so much bench strength in my business from being a training organization that I have to give these people another opportunity, or they're going to go somewhere else? So it's a good time to open up a market. Do I have a high level of confidence that I can replicate my culture, because you have to replicate culture? Do I have a super high level of confidence that I can hit my forecasted targets with a high level of certainty? So those are essentially the four questions that I ask myself before we do something like that. And the fifth thing is, can it be a focus and not a distraction? Can I put a team in place? Can I assign the resources? Can I have somebody have P&L responsibility to that market or to that product line? And if I can do all these things, then you know what? Why wouldn't I do it? So those are some of the questions that I ask myself and ask the team to make sure we're ready for it. But it all does come. It makes it a lot easier when you have bench strength to do those sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there ever a time where you entered a market and it didn't work out for you, and what was that reason?
Yep. The very first time I tried to replicate was, I thought it would be a good idea to I was in the sunroom business, and there was this information out there that there was a lot of leads in Cleveland. So I thought, I'm going to open up a sunroom business in Cleveland. I did it totally wrong. Okay. I didn't know anybody in Cleveland. It takes 2 flights from Appleton to get to Cleveland. It's a nightmare drive to get to Cleveland. We didn't know the market. We just failed. We didn't have our processes documented. We weren't able to hit our targets even in our local business. We got over our skis way too early. But I learned so much from that I learned how to do it right. And then, by doing it right, so I opened my Tundraland business. I replicated in 4 or 5 locations in Wisconsin, opened up my bath business, replicated the business again in Arizona as jacuzzi bath remodel. Then I opened up a couple of Renewal by Anderson window locations. So, all in all, the 3 companies were doing 150 million in revenue. So, we got it right, but we certainly stubbed our toe first really hard.
Sure. How did you choose those markets?
Again, I look to see, is a strategic reason, like we're already going out there, we're kind of servicing it, or is it maybe a market like in Arizona at the time it was an aging population. It was asleep at the wheel when I opened up out here, and I thought there was nobody really competitive out here. Why wouldn't I do this? And I had a team who doesn't want to move from Wisconsin to Arizona? I had a team of people that were hungry to grow and willing to relocate. So I actually relocated a team out here, and we just hit the ground running. And I was able to identify a couple of lead sources. Just a quick story. I walked through the if you walk through the mall in Wisconsin, you'll see it full of home improvement companies, all trying to set appointments and such. I walked through a mall in Arizona. I'm like, there's no home improvement company in Arizona. So I walked through another mall and I saw the same thing. And I realized that I can open up a home improvement company out of the mall just by setting up a kiosk in a mall. And that's what I did. I opened up 2 malls, set kiosks in the malls, and right away we were doing between five and $600,000 a month in revenue just off of these kiosks in malls that we had somebody there setting appointments. So I think if you can see a marketing opportunity and an easy way in, and the market makes sense, and it's builder friendly, and you have a team that can relocate, and you can hit your targets, you know what? Go for it, man. Go for it. It's okay to be wrong, just don't be wrong for long.
Yeah. No, it's great advice. So I'm curious, a lot of businesses, they do reach the point where they're trying to think about what's next.
Yeah.
Am I going to sell the business? Am I going to hand it down? Am I going to, what shut it down? Kind of what is your thoughts, and how
Yeah.
do you prepare people for,
Yeah.
that next transition?
Yeah. So I sold 2 of my 3 businesses to different private equity groups, and then I sold my Renewal by Anderson business to my executive leadership team. So I've been through both sides of it, and I actually work with a team where we help companies plan for that and get their business position to sell or for an exit or transition, whether it's to family or to family office or to private equity. And look, I think if you go into it, that first of all, understanding if you are looking to maybe exit, what do buyers look for, right? Buyers look for, because there's no guarantee of revenue tomorrow in this industry. So they're not buying yesterday's revenue and yesterday's customer list and all that kind of stuff. What they're buying the team, they're buying the systems, they're buying the processes, they're buying the belief that you can hit your targets, they're buying the future. And so you have to make sure that your business is good at that. And this is true whether you want to sell it to your family or, to pass it down to your kids. I think if you go into it with the idea that, how do I ensure that my business can run without me, right? That is a real business and not just a job, and that things are documented and that there's a good culture in place. Then whether or not you sell your business, you've got an amazing business and good for you. And so I think there's that. I think position your business to sell even if you don't want to.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Earlier you talked about, you kept a journal about your things. What if you were to ever start another business, things you would definitely do and things you definitely would not do. I'm curious if you could share some of those definite would do and would not do's.
Yeah, well, the would not do's is I saw a lot of businesses when they got in trouble, they had companies that had people that were not on variable compensation structures. So they had these massive, massive salaries that when things dried up, that was just killing them financially. So I made a decision early on, definitely have to put people on variable comp structures. So they give them a bigger upside, but also as the business is going up and down, so does people's compensation because it's important to business. I saw shrines. I saw companies that had multiple locations. Then when they shut down those locations, they rented like this big warehouse to keep all the stuff in there that they're never going to use again. And it was sucking up their overhead. And it was actually very sad. I saw a lot of marketing that wasn't face to face, so that if the phone stopped ringing, they didn't have a way to make a lead. And when I talk about the ability to make a lead, that's where it came from. That we can't be held hostage to an economic downturn. We have to be able to make leads every single day. When our competitor isn't making leads, it's okay. We're going to go make a lead. If I got knuckles, I'm going to have a business. So I think those are some of the fundamentals that I picked up. And then also, I found a lot of owners did not know their numbers. They did not understand their financials. They didn't understand how to influence them. So, I think all those things are really important in business.
And what were the so I mean, I guess the opposite of all that would be the things that you would do. I mean, is there, beyond kind of, knowing your numbers, making sure you set up the comp, I mean, any other glaring things that, like,
Yeah.
man, if I were to start a new construction business today, I would definitely do this.
Yeah. Well, the idea that when a lot of people lost their job in 2008, I wanted to build a different type of business. I wanted to build a business where there were so many great people out there now looking for a job. I wanted to create a business where people can have more than just a job, more than just a career path, where they could look at their time in my organization even if they've moved on and say, I'm better because of that. That was a pivot point in my life. That's a story I'm always going to tell. And if I can create that, if I can create that type of culture, if I can create that type of meaning and purpose and really be woven into the communities that we serve, the communities will help us be successful. Our mission statement was to do well and do good. And we define it that the purpose of business is to make a decent profit decently. And what does it mean to be decent as a business? And if we can make the customers co-producers in our journey and get them to help us do well so we can do good in our communities, it's going to be a very different organization. So that to me was really at the top of everything, the fundamental change that really delivered success.
I love it. It's couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up here, Brian, I'm curious. Can you just kind of give a little, a little synopsis, a little plug for your book, Beyond the Hammer, and then also, Birdie told me you might have another one coming out. Maybe we get a little sneak peek about what that might be about.
Of a birdie. Yeah, so Beyond the Hammer is designed for managers and leaders alike. It's in print, but it's also on audio. It's a fantastic audio book. I highly recommend it, but it's very approachable. It's full of actionable items that you can plug into your business. The reviews have been terrific. We hit multiple bestseller lists on Amazon, plus on Barnes and Noble. It's also in Hudson airports, in the Hudson airports across the country, but you can certainly get it on Amazon. You should get it today. It's a great book. I promise you, you'll love it. And yes, we have a new book coming out. It's going to be a sales-driven book. I'm working with Erica Massi on it. It's going to be a terrific, terrific book. Yeah, it's going to be fun. So
Awesome. Well, Brian, look, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing all of this insight. I mean, your experience, your knowledge, your wisdom is very apparent. Just the leadership, the philosophies that you have developed and really have been able to also document and articulate so that you can share it with others is so helpful. I really appreciate what you do for the community, and I see you. I mean, you're a servant leader. You're giving back all the time, trying to help others. Be able to have that same level of success that you have. So, with much due respect for that.
well, and thank you too for the positive impact you and your team make in this industry. You have such a great tool, for your customers, such a great tool. But also your events and all those sort of things. I mean, you just really you're doing it the right way. You're making a decent profit decently, and it's so cool to see. So congratulations. And thank you.
Absolutely, I appreciate it, and hopefully we can get you out to one of our Job Trade Connects. We do that annual event every January where we just bring together. I think we had to stop selling tickets at 1,000 attendees last year, but we figured out a way. I think we can grow it again this year. But yeah, look, I just thank you so much, Brian, for
Thank
coming
you,
on, for spending this time, and
Appreciate
for
your
sharing all
time.
of this. All right, have a good one.
See you. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Builder Stories. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and gained valuable insights that can help you in your journey along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave us a review. And as always, if you or someone you know has a story to share, please contact us at builderstories.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Eric Fortenberry, and remember, every builder has a unique story. Keep building yours.